These are the notes for 5.4 Part 2, and we're going to be factoring using the AC method. This is the second time I've recorded these notes, like I told you guys in class today, so I might go kind of fast because I'm kind of not happy that I have to record them again. So we're going to be factoring using the AC method. Alright, so this is going to come into play when we factor something like this. Let's see. Okay, 3x squared minus 10x minus 8. So if we want to factor this, if we were going to do it the old way where we try to find two numbers that multiply to negative 8 and add to negative 10, first of all, I'm not sure if you could find any numbers that do that, but also when we set up those parentheses and just put an x in the front of each one, if we went back to check our work and multiplied those, x times x is just x squared. But what we really wanted was 3x squared. So this way is not going to work. So we have to do something a little more complicated, and it is called the AC method. So I'm going to write out the steps for the AC method over here, and then we'll do the problem over there on the left. So the AC method comes into play whenever you have a value for A other than 1. And go ahead and label your problem with the A, B, and C like I just did right there. So the first step in the AC method is to find two numbers that multiply to A times C. That's why it's called the AC method. And add to B. So it's very similar to what we're doing before. Last time we were looking for two numbers that multiplied to C and added to B. The only thing that changed this time is we're looking for two numbers that multiply to A times C and they add up to B. So we have to do the A times C thing. So I'm going to do this first step over here for this problem. So the first thing I want to do is figure out what AC is. A times C. Well, my A is 3 and my C is negative 8. So I'm just multiplying A times C, and that's going to get us negative 24. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 24, that's AC, and they have to add to my B value, which is negative 10. So let's try to find some numbers that do that. So let's look at our factors of 24. We've got 1 times 24, 2 times 12, and as soon as I write 2 times 12, I'm thinking, hey, you know what? I think I could get that negative 10 from that if I added them. So since I'm trying to multiply to a negative 24, I know one of my two numbers has to be a negative. And since I'm trying to add to negative 10 to a negative number, I need my bigger number to be negative, so that when I add 2 plus negative 12, it adds up to negative 10 and multiplies to negative 24. So those are my two numbers I'm going to use. Our second step is that we're going to rewrite our polynomial. So the original polynomial we were given. Now the only thing different when we rewrite it is we're going to replace the b value with our two numbers that we found in step 1. So I'm going to rewrite my original polynomial, which is 3x squared minus 10x minus 8. I'm just rewriting it here because I want to be able to see it. I can't see it anymore. And we're going to replace this negative 10x with our two numbers we found in step 1, 2 and negative 12. So I'm going to keep my 3x squared the same, but now instead of negative 10x, I'm going to write plus 2x, that came from right there, minus 12x, that came from right there. And then I have that minus 8 on the end. So these two polynomials that I have written down are the same exact thing, because if I combined my 2x minus 12x, that would be negative 10x. So they're really just the same. I just wanted to write it a little differently because this is going to allow me to do step 3, which is to factor by grouping. So now we're back to what we were doing in one of our previous lessons, where we are just going to factor this guy by grouping it into parts. So we are going to group this and this. So in my first one, I can pull out an x, and I'm left with 3x plus 2. So now, when I pull something out of my second set right here, I know I want my x term to be positive. Right now, it's a negative 12x. So I know I need to divide by a negative to change those signs. And the biggest factor I can pull out of 12 and 8 is a 4. So I'm going to divide both of these by negative 4. And I'm left with 3x plus 2, which is great because that's exactly what's in my other set of parentheses. So now I can continue my factoring by grouping. I can pull out a 3x plus 2 from both of those, and I'm left with x minus 4. And if I went and multiplied all that back out, I would get what I started with, 3x squared minus 10x minus 8. In my first video, I actually did that, and I don't feel like doing it right now. All right, so let's try another example. It's going to require an extra step. So I'm going to factor this polynomial, 6x to the 6th minus 19x to the 5th plus 10x to the 4th. Ooh, so this one looks really scary. Look at those big powers of x. The thing is, remember our first step of factoring any problem is that we want to factor a common factor out of all those three terms if we can. So from all three of those terms, I see that I can pull out x to the 4th, almost said x to the 6th, and then I'm going to be left with some nice smaller things. So my first guy, I'm left with 6x squared. He had 6 x's. I took 4 of them, so he has 2 now. And my second one, I'm left with 19x, or negative 19x. And in my last term, I'm left with just plus 10, because I took out that whole x to the 4. So now we can do the AC method. The main thing you want to make sure is don't forget this x to the 4th that we pulled out. So I'm going to leave myself some room to rewrite that polynomial. Remember, our first step of the AC method is we need to find two numbers that multiply to whatever a times c is. So a times c is 6 times 10, and that is 60. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to positive 60 and add to negative 19. So let's look at our factors of 60. 1 times 60, that won't get me 19. 2 times 30, that won't get me 19. 3 times 20, that will, I could get 17, that's pretty close. 4 times 15, ooh, I think I can get negative 19 from 4 and 15. So I want to multiply up to a positive number, so I can either do a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. In order to add up to negative 19, I need to make them both negative. So negative 4 and negative 15 are my two numbers that multiply to negative 60, or sorry, positive 60, and they add up to negative 19. So I'm going to rewrite my polynomial now. This is step 2. But I'm going to replace this negative 19x with negative 4x minus 15x. Those are my two numbers that I found right here. And then I have this plus 10. Now, when you fill those in, the negative 4x and negative 15x, it doesn't matter which order you put them in. You could have put the negative 15x first and then minus 4x, and it would still work out. So let's go ahead and we're going to factor by grouping. Don't forget that x to the 4 out in front that you factored out. Anything you factored out has to stay in the problem because we're rewriting an equivalent expression. We don't want to change anything. We just want to write it kind of differently. So let's see if we can factor this by grouping. Out of these first two, I think I can pull out a 2x. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a bracket here because I'm going to have lots of parentheses going on. So I'm pulling out a 2x and I'm left with 3x minus 2. Now in my next set right here, I'm going to factor this guy. I can pull out a 5 from both of those, and we want to decide if I should pull out a positive or a negative. Since I want my x term to turn into a positive, and right now it's negative, I need to pull out a negative, because pulling out a negative changes the sign. So I'm going to pull out a negative 5, and I'm left with positive 3x minus 2. So I just divided both of these guys by that negative 5. So this looks like it's going to work right now. I can pull out a 3x minus 2 from here and here. So I'm going to bring down my x to the 4th. I'm pulling out a 3x minus 2, and I am left with 2x minus 5. And that's my whole answer. So the only thing different there was we had to pull out a number in front before we did the rest of the AC method. All right, one more together. I'm going to give you one to try on your own. So let's try another kind of simple one here. We're going to do the AC method because I see there's a number in front of my x squared. As soon as I see that, I'm thinking I have to do the AC method. So we're going to figure out what a times c is. That's 3 times negative 8. Those are my a and my c values. It might help a lot of you guys to write a, b, and c above these numbers whenever you start. So AC is negative 24. So we know we need to multiply up to negative 24 and add to our b value, which is 10. All right, so that Microsoft Word just opened, so I'm really hoping this is still working here. Okay, so what I need to do now is, let's see, we're going to rewrite this polynomial, and we're going to replace, oh sorry, we need to figure out those two numbers. So I'm multiplying to negative 24. Let's see, 1 times 24, ooh, 2 times 12. I think that'll work. I need to multiply to a negative but add to a positive. So I think 12 and negative 2 will work. Those multiply to negative 24 and add to positive 10. So I'm going to rewrite this. I'm going to replace this and make it negative 2x plus 12x. And then I've got the minus 8 on the end. So then we have, let's see, out of these two we can pull out an x, and we're left with 3x minus 2. Out of these two we can pull out a positive 4, and we're left with 3x minus 2. And then I can pull that 3x minus 2 out of both of those. Whoops, sorry, I don't know why I'm using yellow. And I'm left with x plus 4. And that's it. So I'm going to give you one to try here. So I want you to try and factor this polynomial, 6x to the 4th minus 116x to the 3 minus 80x squared. And keep in mind that you're probably going to need to divide out a common factor out of all three terms and then do the AC method. So see if you guys can get that one, and we'll talk about it in class.